Talking about fashion history with Kate and Heather at the Grand Costumier. Grand Costumier, Grand Costumier, Grand Costumier.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Heather Lou of Closet Core Patterns here again with Kate Lecours, chef costumier.
Yes.
I did it right this time. The grand, basically the head costumer in English of the Grand Costumier.
Exactly.
I got it right. Which is an incredible resource here in Montreal for predominantly costume rental for cinema, film, fashion, kind of industry level. We're not, the plebes are not coming in off the...
Exactly. So we rent only for professionals. That can be wide. That can be also be fashion designer that want accessories for their fashion show, stylists,
designers. I mean, we came in
exactly
a couple months ago when we started looking because we're doing our decades collection right now for Crew. We're designing a new pattern inspired by a new decade every month. And we had come in just to get inspired because there's just floors and floors of everything from kind of medieval, prehistoric reproductions all the way to now. So this month we wanted to kind of focus on 60s boho dresses coming from women, obviously this hippie era. Again, kind of tied to what we were doing with Crew this month with our Alice dress, which was this very kind of bohemian inspired hippie dress. And for me, this is one of my favorite periods. You were just, before we went on camera, you were talking about how you were a goth kid.
Absolutely.
So this was not so much your vibe?
It wasn't so much my vibe, but it was while I was still searching for what I wanted to be, right? So to me, that's really a mix between the grungy and the anti-conformism of the 90s.
Yeah.
And then I dyed everything black, and that was it.
For me, this has always been an era of really gravitated towards, I can be very, in my my clothing, very gender neutral, I guess. I love just basics, a button down. But there is this boho spirit in me that really has a very emotional attachment to what I'm seeing right here. So this feels kind of emblematic of this era. So we're looking at probably late 60s right now?
Late 60s, early 70s. So we really have this it bridged the decade, right? So we'll see it happen late 60s and then kind of go up all the way to the mid 70s. But this is really emblematic of the shift between the two.
And when I first saw this, I was like, is this Gunne Sax? And you said it was a knockoff.
It's a knockoff.
What this reminds me of, I'm a Joanna Newsom stan for life. She's one of my favorite musicians. I say I'm a deadhead for her. I will travel to go see her play. And in the mid 2000s, this is all that queen was wearing. She just looked like a medieval, fairy princess wearing all of these vintage Gunne Sax dresses. And what I find really interesting about this is in our first video for this series, we were talking about denim and how denim changed over the decades. And you were talking a lot about how in the 60s, hippies were going to thrift stores and they were going to Army Surplus and they were getting denim because they were kind of this anti-conformist. We don't want to buy clothes in stores and making it their own. And so there was a similar kind of thing happening here.
Absolutely. So in the thrift store, or they would be more charity shop at the time, they would still find Georgian dresses. So dresses from the 1900s, the 1910s, because that wasn't so far away from
40
them.
or 50 years ago.
And then they would either wear them as is or also modify them. So when we're looking at what it transformed into the actual fashion. So first you'll have all these lace inserts paired with super fine cotton gauze. And this lightness is something that we don't necessarily find that much. So again, when we were talking about thrifting, if you see super light cotton, but still really resistant, it's a really good indication that you're in the 60s and the 70s.
Because what I find so interesting, would we say from a high fashion point of view, if I'm thinking about, if we're looking at big designers from this period, we're looking at Biba, Ossie Clark, right? Swinging London, that was this very, so do you think that this, people going to the thrift stores and pulling out the Edwardian blouses and those Georgian dresses are they informing what those designers are doing, or are those designers going into the thrift stores and feeling inspired, and then it's disseminating down to like hippie culture?
It's more that, because there's also a very like different, like there's an opposition, right, between the mods and the very ultra like modern things versus the real thrift store elements that are looking more at the past and at this idea of like the pre-machine era, and this idea of like going back to the arts and to the roots and to what came before that.
Well, there's like a romanticism and a nostalgia for this time, right? Because like the 60s, it's like the war in Vietnam is in full threat. We have the kind of emergence of a psychedelic drug culture. We had this kind of like teen rebellion in the 50s, and then we had the Beats. And there was this kind of like growing anti-conformist post-war. We don't want to, have 2 kids and live in the suburbs. We want to be free.
Exactly. We want to go back to the farm and the communal spaces, and it ties in this idea of like the peasant dress, so that bohemian aspect of not necessarily being tied to one place but also having a farm and also living off the land, and like these long dresses and like these peasant prints also, with all the flowers that are like ubiquitous, not just from the Georgian era but also this idea of like the actual fields.
Yeah, like, and we're looking at a lot of ditzy florals, particularly when we're looking at something like this. What I find really fascinating is that kind of romanticism, the romanticizing of these. It's almost like what we see happening right now with like trad wife culture. It's like in times of upheaval and uncertainty, we look to the past. We feel like things were better back then. Things were simpler times. We lived on a farm and everything was so easy. Meanwhile, it's like everybody lived to 35. They were dying of typhus and they were all malnourished. We had a potato famine. So I think this is a really kind of glam version of this thing. I'm going to pull a few more pieces and we can kind of see how all of these ideas kind of come apart. Okay, so I think this next dress is a really great transition. Speaking of, this feels a little bit more glam, but speaking of these ditzy florals, and this feels like such a 60s palette to me too.
Absolutely. So it's floral, but it's kind of brown.
Yeah.
It's kind of brown. It's kind of beige. What I really like about this one, when we were just talking about this idea of going back to the farm, you have all of a sudden like aprons that find their way into still like a very fashionable dress.
And this is a useless apron. This isn't detachable. It's built into the dress.
It's tacked on. So it's built in. It's in the same super light gauze. It is not made to be, carrying potatoes going back, outside in your shed. It is really just a fashionable detail.
And what I find interesting about this feels to me a bit Georgian, because it's got that empire waist here, but then this feels very Edwardian or Victorian with this really kind of almost puff sleeve, and then it gets really narrow at the waist. Like there's so many eras happening here at the same time.
There's something that's a little bit medieval.
Yes.
When we were talking about this romantic era of like the past and before the machine, you'll have some elements that are medieval. So this really high waist, this sort of like
square neckline.
Yeah, and also like triangle aspect. That's really, really fun.
I think this is a nice transitional piece too. So this is like almost like a crinkle cotton. What's interesting too about the lace, so we had that lace application there. It wasn't like a lace insertion. Like we've done YouTube videos about how to do that. That was really an applied lace. Where here we are seeing it as an insertion where either, I don't know if any fabric was cut away, but here the lace is crocheted and it's actually like a pattern piece.
Exactly. This is a pattern piece. It's really like a lace insertion. And you were absolutely right. This is crochet. So that's something that we're going to see also, going back to traditional method of embellishment and making macrames, crochet, knitting, that's really present. This crinkle cotton also finds its way in a lot of this fashion coming from India. So the hippies are in a way of like breaking with tradition and breaking with normal ways of thinking about life. They look a lot at Asia and at all as its religion, and therefore, they go a lot, and they bring back some elements. So this to me is really like Indian cotton that is crinkly. That comes back with the fashion.
Yeah, and we'll see if we have any out here, but like Indian textiles, I think, became a huge export for India because there was this huge thirst in North America for these beautiful textiles, paisleys, and those kind of like Indian motifs. So I think we'll see them in some of these.
Embroideries also, and we'll see a lot of like mirrors, but we'll get back to it.
Now we're getting very Little House on the Prairie with this.
So much.
This feels like the evangelical Christian version of this look, where it's a little bit more traditional. Like this feels like your best church dress.
To me, this is, the other one was the dress that she really wanted, but this is the version her mom said, you can have this one. Because this one you can go to church with.
There's pin tucks here. We've got all of this like same thing. There's some like crochet detail here.
And really like almost like a bib, like a full bib sewn on that is reminiscent again of the Georgian blouses that we saw before.
Super high neck. Yeah, this is kind of a Victorian detail. Again, it's like all of these different eras like meeting and making these weird children. Here's something.
Oh, I love this one. Love, love, love this one. Again, same cotton gauze, but many, many, many layers of it. There's something very Gone with the Wind for me with this one.
Yes, there's something very Southern Belle with all this like lace applique. Wow, this is something.
The puffy and, the puffy sleeves.
These pleats here are really cool.
The ties also, again.
Like cinching the waist.
To me, there's something very Marie Antoinette and Chemise à la Reine in that too, in this romanticizing what really happens on a farm. There's good chances you can't really wear that on the farm.
Well, it's interesting with it because I think a lot of these dresses that we've seen have been very waist conscious. So they're cinched in the waist, but then obviously we have looks where it's about freedom and it's about comfort. And so we're kind of getting away from that. Let's see if I can find something like here. We start moving into like a looser silhouette. This is wild. And it's very heavy and it's very thick.
So this is all hand embroidered using traditional technique. So time consuming also. So again, this idea of like, they're really thinking about, these are techniques that are going to get lost to time if we don't save them. So this coming back to the roots and doing things that are done the traditional way is interesting.
We have to kind of remember too that like, in the 30s, most people were making their own clothes, but post-war, we have all these improvements to mechanization. We've got factories. You're able to like produce clothing much more cheaply and quickly. And so I imagine that was scary for people the first time. If you grew up sewing, and then all of a sudden you're able to go into a store, you are going to kind of I think very similar to now. I think the reason a lot of people started sewing is because we feel really divorced from where clothing comes from.
And clothing became so much cheaper to go in stores and produce also. So I think that this idea of like saving how we used to make them was important.
I've never seen any loop detail like this where it's almost three-dimensional.
The attention to detail in doing that ombre.
Unbelievable. I wonder if the thread was dyed or if it must have been an ombre thread.
I don't know because see, like you have one line going one color, the other line's another color. It doesn't seem to change.
I'm seeing one shift from white to a light blue, and then I'm seeing this one shift from blue to navy. So it is, the thread I think was ombre, but the effect of it is so beautiful. And this was obviously a handmade dress. This wasn't commercially available. But here we're seeing it's like the waist, it's an empire waist, it's a higher waist, it's loose. You're not constricted in this.
This is probably a bit more of a house dress.
Wow.
And less, fashionable.
Now I love this one, and this really comes back to this idea of being inspired by the East. So this is like very almost something like a traditional Indian garment.
I think it is. So bringing back from India also, you have entire groups of garment like tunics, like kaftans, that becomes a normal part of everyday life. So yeah, this is definitely a traditional Indian tunic.
The embroidery is unbelievable.
And it's done on crepe Georgette. also.
Okay, so this is
So-
silk.
So it's really, really difficult to do such embroidery on a material like crepe because if your needle's too big, you're going to poke holes and it's going to start to fray. The embroidery is on top and on the bottom.
Well, that's what's really interesting is it looks three-dimensional because you're seeing the underside of the white thread, and then you're like, this is what it looks like on the wrong side. But because the fabric is so sheer, it appears like a lighter yellow embroidery, and then with the white on top, like the skill required and the patience required. And this was all hand done. So just you can imagine. But then it was, you know, somebody bought this at a bazaar and brought it back from a trip to India, and it's exceptionally beautiful.
And so light.
Oh,
also.
this is like, it is like a little dream. And actually the back is gorgeous too. So now the motif is getting broken up. So rather than that full scale, now we have these like beautiful flowers. And the color is just exquisite.
So much yellow in that period too.
It's my time. Well, here we have a party outfit. Tell us about this.
We do. And again, this idea of like going back to the roots and going back to traditional things. There's a whole like cowboy frontier life that happens along with all the traditional methods of like South America.
Well, this is definitely what they were wearing to settle the West. Just a little pair of pink suede hot pants.
Hot pants with traditional tablet weaved appliques in that wild color. And this is where you see like the mod and the hippie kind of collapsing together, because then it's not that maxi. This is the epitome of the mini, right? In short. It must have been absolutely horrible to wear.
Well, I'm also I'm looking at these military buttons here. I'm also just thinking, remember like Jim Morrison never wanted to take his leather pants off and apparently just smelled like an absolute catastrophe. And then
I can believe. So you have all of these elements that are clashing into this two-piece suit that was probably worn with just maybe a bra, maybe no bra underneath. So there's this risque aspect.
just what I want rubbing up against my nipples, suede.
Suede, lovely. I think the only thing we're missing here is like fringe.
Yeah.
Like a good fringe moment.
Like a fringe boot, maybe a little go-go boot.
Or just like a sleeve. Just like a sleeve with pink.
Oh, 100%.
Fuchsia suede.
I love this so much. So that's kind of going more in the Western direction, but then also looking to Mexico, obviously.
So traditional Mexican or like South American embroidery, like coral and embroidery, and just the shape of the garment also.
So pretty. So just in terms of textiles, those kind of motifs that are being kind of imported and inspired by people traveling.
So the paisley really comes back like in a very, very strong manner. What I like about the paisley of that period is often it's really big, really, really big and oversized.
And playing with scale here, right? So we're going from really big to really small. This feels like a very 60s print. I'm not seeing any paisley on here, but do you have anything to share about this?
I love the fact that, again, this is so transparent and it's just buttoned at the top. There's not really that idea of wanting to cover the body and the body being negative that I often associate with boho dress.
Yeah, this is a very free the nipple look right here.
Absolutely.
Okay, this is really beautiful. Again, coming back to these, I think there's a few things, there's like almost 3 blouses we can look at in kind of succession.
So we have this lace insertion moment, but actually it's not even lace, it's like a crochet. That really, really plays on our Victorian Georgian blouses. But what's really fun is like, you can't mistake it for an actual Georgian when you look at the tag.
Chouchoute.
Yeah, chouchoute, France, Paris, with really, really like 60s, 70s colors.
I want to be in Paris in the 60s so bad. Okay, and so now I think this is a cool transition. So now, similar, pin tucks, lace.
Tiny pin tucks.
This is linen, I think. It's so beautiful.
Look at the back also. All the pin tucks. Like, that must have taken forever to make.
And then this embroidery, it's really heavy. It almost feels like a tapestry. So everybody who's like making their weaving,
Very, very, very shiny thread also.
I think it feels like a silk thread.
And
I don't think
it's the case here, but one thing that you'll see often is that you'll see actual Georgian lace still used on these blouses. This is contemporary, but often you'll see that.
Well, just like, you know, if you're inheriting your grandma's button tin or her lace tin, you're going to be finding ways to kind of introduce that into your sewing. Mm-hmm. This is so pretty. And then this is probably my favorite. And this is when I talk about my own kind of inner boho. This is the kind of thing, if I'd found this in a thrift store in the 90s, I would have died. I would have absolutely died.
So it's this.
This doesn't feel like silk. I think this might be viscose, maybe rayon.
I was going to say rayon probably. So, but then you have all the little hand smocking in different color.
The seam is like, it's like a hand-rolled hem that's all finished with alternating colors of embroidery thread. The neckline's finished in the same way.
The little poofy sleeves
and the smocking on the back. So this is all done. All this fabric is gathered with a smocked stitch. Oh my God, I love this. This is maybe the most Alice dress of the looks that we've picked so far. And all of this embroidery on the side. Mm-hmm. I absolutely love this.
There's something very like, it moves very lightly also. That's really fun.
Well, viscose was it was kind of a war invention because they were using silk for the parachutes and stuff like that. I think it was just one of those things that they invented. And then it became really popular as a silk alternative because it was more affordable. I know I didn't know how much rayon used to shrink. I think they've kind of worked that out. But back, like the original rayon and viscose, like you couldn't get it wet. And I'd bought a vintage dress and I didn't know, and I washed it and it shrunk like 5 sizes. Like it wasn't one size, it went from a normal size to a small. It was devastating.
Oh, love this one.
Strawberry shortcake.
Love this one. So again, all of this hand embroidery in the presence of like all these tiny flowers. The ruffle also. I love the details on marking the edges also. There's
it's like a zigzag stitch that was used to finish this one.
And this is all obviously handmade.
And doesn't this scream to be worn with a super high-waisted pair of bell-bottoms? Okay, I think that wraps up our little tour through 60s and 70s boho fashion. Thank you so much for opening up this collection to us. I hope whether or not you're just interested in the history part or you do so, you're going to find some kind of inspiration here. And what I'm finding really inspiring and comforting about this conversation is how interconnected all of these periods are, and how regardless of what era you're in, we're always like looking to the past, and there's all of these connections that unite different, like women in different eras of history and how we were approaching fashion and the way that we dressed. I don't know. I'm really curious to see what we're doing in 20 years.
Absolutely. So, and to think that all of these cool eras, they go back to this idea of looking at the past and going thrifting. So I think we're on the right path and continuing this trend into making our own clothes.
And regardless of whether or not you sew, like I hope just taking some inspiration about all you need is like a needle and some embroidery thread and you can make something really beautiful that nobody else has. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this, we've got more videos coming from Kate. We're always talking about sewing here at Closet Core, so like and subscribe and have a great day.
Thank you.